Hey, welcome back to the garage. Today I'm going to take care of some brake lines on my old 1966 International pickup. You can see I've pulled the old line out so I can use that as a template. It's a little bit rusty. It's actually, considering the age of the truck, it's not in bad shape. But I'm going through and redoing a lot of the brakes. Also, I had to kind of change. You can't get a lot of the original parts for these, so I had to change where this ends up because I'm having to use different kinds of T's. So it'll be a slight modification for this, but I can use this as my template for bending up my new line. Now, if you're trying to do this on something that you don't have the old lines as a template, you can just take some wire. I'll show you how to do that. There's another one I'm going to have to do that won't be the same as the original show, so I'll give you an example of that. But this one, I should be able to just do the same thing, put the bends in the same place. The only difference is I need to end on that end just slightly differently, but for the most part, this is going to make a good template. So I've got a coil of just normal steel brake line. Now, there's other options on this. You can go with stainless steel, which will certainly last longer, a little harder to work with, but if you've got the right tools, it'll work. You can also get various copper coated and things like that. This truck it's really never going to be outside, so I'm sticking with plain steel. The plain steel's lasted it this long, so should work out well for me. I've got a 25-foot coil. Well, it started out as a 25-foot coil. I've made a couple little lines out of it, so a little less than that. One tip I will give you is buy extra brake line. This stuff isn't too expensive, and you're going to make some that don't quite turn out right. So tools needed for this, of course, you need the brake line. You're going to need something to bend it with. What I've got, it's just a normal, they sell this at Home Depot. It's a normal brake bending tool. This is really nice for making nice smooth bends. It's a little cumbersome and it's not great for little adjustments. For that, I left it over to the side. Give me just a sec. All right, I should get more organized for these things. For adjustments and a little more fine tuning, I really like these. I got these through Eastwood. These are their brake forming pliers, and basically they're pliers that the jaws are just the right size to fit different size of tubing, and you can bend it without kinking the tube. So these are very handy. Another very important thing you need for this is a good sharp tubing cutter. You could, some people try to do this with a hacksaw. Things don't work out real well. These are not that expensive. Get the right tool for the job. Make sure it's a good sharp one. You can get these at any place they sell plumbing tools, or parts stores usually have them. And also you're going to need the reamer to deburr the inside after you cut it. So first things first, I need to straighten out a length of this. Of course, it comes out comes curled up. So to start with, I find just rolling it on the table, I can get it fairly straight. And I'm gonna get, well, to start with, I'm gonna go just slightly less than the whole thing, just so it's a little easier to work with. I'm gonna start on one end of my brake line and work the other way. All right, so on this end, I know the way I want to change this is I want this to go straight just a few more inches. So we'll just leave a little extra. We can always cut more off at the end. So we'll start there, and I'm going to try to line this up so that we know we need to do a bend there. So I'm going to try to use my forming pliers for this because it's just a fairly short bend. And you don't want to, with these, you do want to do a little bend and then move it, a little more bend. You don't want to bend it all in one spot. Okay, for this next one, it's a little more of a severe bend. I think I'm going to use the bending tool for that. Now, it's important not to note not just the angle of the bend, but how it's clocked in comparison to the other bends. So this one, it's bent this way and about 90 degrees to this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark where I want to start and on the outside of the bend. So I want to start right about here. Now this has a slightly larger radius than this, so I'm starting my bend a little bit before, but pretty close. So I know that if I use that mark as the outside of the bend, and I want to go this direction, so now let me get closer to the camera. So you can see on here, you can see there's a 0 here. I'm going to line my mark up with that 0 so that I know that's where my bend starts. Okay, all lined up. Now I'm going to bend it to the 90-degree mark. Let's see how we did. All right, that lines up pretty darn close with what we had. Now there's always going to be some adjustments once you get it on the vehicle, but you need the distance between your bends to be about right, and you need to, be pretty close on things. All right, so now another one. I want to start right about there. And that's the outside of the bend. All right, looking pretty good. Okay, here's a little bit of a close-up of what I am doing here, an example. So here you can see, hopefully you can see that, I have a little plus, which is the start of the outside of my bend. Now, the way this works, let's say we need to bend up towards me here. That plus, that little mark I put, I'm going to put, open this up all the way, and I'm going to line that up with the 0 mark here. Get that lined up again. Like I said, it's a little clumsy, which is why I'm showing you on a sample piece here. So once you get that on the outside of the bend, you can just push this around until the 0 on this lines up with the angle you want. So let's say we want 90 degrees. We'll push that right up until it says 90. And we've got a perfect bend. And that's all there is to it. So it's just that, measuring, keeping track of which direction you want to bend, and taking your time, and don't be afraid to throw away a piece when you did it wrong. All right, so I've got my tubing bent. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fine tuning when I get it on the truck. And what I did is I just hacked off the end a few inches extra long using the bandsaw. Now, like I said, you don't want to do that for your final cut. You want to use a proper tubing cutter. So I'm sure you've seen these before, but it's just a sharp wheel with 2 rollers and a screw that you tighten down that puts pressure on that cutting wheel. So I put a little Sharpie mark right where I want to cut it from lining it up with the old one. And I'm just going to put just a little bit of pressure, go all the way around, a little more pressure. Now don't get in a hurry. You don't need to really clamp down on it with the wheel, but just a little pressure each time. You'll feel it gets easier once it finishes that cut. Keep doing that a few times, it'll fall right off. Now, that does leave a little bit of a burr on the inside, which could make the fitting not work as well as you'd like. So that's what this piece on the tubing cutter is for deburring that. Now this is 3/16 tubing, which is fairly typical for brake lines. This deburring tool, it's a little big, but I can just get it in there, and you just stick it in the end and kind of spin it around a little bit, and it should knock that burr down. So now the next piece, and this is something you need a tool for. The next job is to put a flare on the end of this. Now, the way I used to do this, I didn't used to have a flaring tool, and what I would do is you can buy standard lengths of just straight tube with the flares and the fittings on them, and you can bend that up. I redid my Jeep that way a few years ago. It works. The problem is, since you're limited to the lengths that you can get. If you need to do a long distance, you got to put a union between two pieces, which I don't like having any more connections in there than I have to have. Or the other problem is you're probably going to have more tubing than you need, so you have to put in extra bends just to to take up that extra bit of tubing. So it is nice to be able to bend up, cut a piece of tubing the length you want and put your own flare on it. So to do the flaring, there's a few different tools on this, but here's the one I like. There's a few companies that make these. I bought it through Eastwood because they had it on sale, but you can get this same exact thing from various companies. They're usually around 200 bucks. I think I got it on sale for 170. But these do a really nice job of doing flares. So what it is, it's this piece, you mount it in a vise. So the one downside is if you, for some reason, needed to flare a tube while it was on the vehicle, like if you had a piece and you needed to just cut it and flare it on the vehicle, you can't get this in there. But any time where you can get it off the vehicle, this works wonders. They give you dies for a few different sizes of tubings. So it's got these dies that actually clamp the tubing together, and then this head turns to, you can turn it for whichever size tubing flare you want. Now this, I just have the, was it 45, the normal brake flare style, which I believe is 45 degrees. You can get, and this just pops off, you can get a set that, an additional set for this that will do what's called AN fittings, which is, I believe, 37 degrees, usually used in hydraulics and things like that. Fairly versatile tool, that just slops on, you just swap that in for the other size or the other angle if you wanted to do that. So I'm gonna get reset up here with my vise and show you how we can flare some tubing with this. All right, it's easier for me to film this if I just use a small piece. Things are a little awkward, hard to get the camera in here. So I'm just gonna use this sample piece to show you how this goes together. So we've got our cut and deburred end here. Very important, and you will mess this up. Don't forget to put the fitting on first. Even if you're, you may think you could slide it in from the other end, but if you've got any sort of a bend, you can't slide it past the bend. So, and that same thing goes for if you do the pre-bent tubes that already, or the pre-flared tubes that have the fittings on them. I wasted one time where I had the fittings slid all the way back. I put my bend in it and then I couldn't slide it to the end. So something to keep in mind. Now, in the tool, make sure you've got the right size die. This is 3/16 tubing. Make sure you've got the 3/16, and I'll double check that it says, I don't know if you can see that. Probably not. That says 3/16 on it. And there is a right and a wrong way on this. See how this side is flared a little bit, this side is flat. The reason for this flat bit is it allows you to get the, since you need this on, if you needed to go clear up, as close to the bend as possible, that gives a little clearance for the fitting to fit in there. So the two halves of the die go in and then close the clamp. Now to set the depth, the tubing needs to be flush with the end of this, and they give you a special, it's basically, it says OP0, Operation 0, which is just a flat piece. If you close it up, and you don't need to really put pressure on it, just make sure it's closed. So make sure your tubing's pushed in all the way, and then this pushes everything back to the stop, and you tighten your clamp down. Once it's clamped in, well, you don't need to really bear down on this. This holds it pretty well. Just make sure it's enough that it won't slip. We look on here and we look for Operation 1 3/16. And this is a two-stage process. So the first one puts just a bubble on it. So we do Operation 1, push the handle down until it stops. And let's see, I did a piece earlier. So this is what it does. It just creates a little bulb on the end. And now the next part is going to push that in and make our flare. So we go look for Operation 2 for 3/16. And same thing, push down until it stops. And we can loosen our clamp. And there we go. We have a perfect flare. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It's one of those things, brake work kind of scares people off, and, reasonably so, because, it's something you don't want failing. But if you take your time and, make sure, you get everything flared properly and check things for leaks, you should be good. Now, I still need to get that put in the truck. It's a little hard to film under there, so I think that's where I'm going to wrap this one up. A few tips I have are, don't be afraid to throw some tubing away. Even if you spend a lot of time on it, if it's not right, it's more hassle than it's going to be worth when you try to get it into the vehicle. Make sure it's not going to be rubbing on something and wear through, because let me tell you, you don't want a brake line breaking on you. I did have that once on my Jeep where one rusted out. It can be very scary. These brake forming pliers are very useful, especially once you're installing it in the vehicle. You can do nice bends with these without kinking things, because you're going to need to do a lot of adjustments. Simple, small ones you can do with your hands, but be afraid, or be very careful so you don't kink it. So yeah, that's all I had for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you do, I appreciate you subscribing to the channel. If you have suggestions or comments, I definitely appreciate any feedback on the videos. So you can leave a comment below, and we'll be back in another week or so, and I'm hoping to get back to work on my old Datsun here. I said I was going to have it on the road in time for summer, and it's, well, we got a foot of snow the other day, so summer's a ways off, but I also have quite a bit of work to do on that. So I hope to get back on that, and we'll be shooting some videos on that. So until then, get out in your garage, do something interesting.